On. Yeah, we're on. John Vickers. Welcome back to H Hour.
Thank you, Hugh. Lovely to be back.
Third appearance?
Second.
Nope. Incorrect.
Okay.
First appearance was very early on.
Yeah, very early.
H Hour, you were one of the first H Hour guests.
I brought a moon with me.
Yeah, early on. You were in the first 10 or 20, I think.
Yeah.
I think now you're going to be number 249. And the second appearance was on a little H Hour spin-off called Leading Minds. Remember?
I do.
Yeah.
Now that you bring it up.
I'm thinking about reviving that next year.
I think that would be I think the awareness people have about mindset has grown exponentially in the time since we first spoke, and doing that Leading Minds.
Yeah, so welcome back. And, mate, what a year 22-24 has been. The last time you came in, I think, well, the stage you were at last time with the Blue Abyss was extremely different.
Yeah.
And the stage you're at now is obviously Ohio and the UK site on the horizon. But didn't I read in the latest newsletter that you've been training Saudi budding astronauts?
So we got involved in a project, it must be nearly 2 years ago now. I got approached by an American company. I don't think it's necessarily a secret, Jacobs Engineering, to ask us if we would be interested, willing to participate in a project turned out to be with a Saudi space agency. It wasn't called the Saudi Space Agency at the time, where we would be responsible as subject matter experts, not me necessarily, but the company, provide subject matter experts to help recruit. And then, so what would a recruitment process in a country look like? How do you take a country and say, we want to recruit and train an astronaut corps? So we wrote that recruitment process, and then we wrote the initial training program.
These are government astronauts, right?
To all intents and purposes, yeah. Whether or not they go up as government astronaut, it's a country deciding on an astronaut program. How do you create a NASA astronaut corps effectively?
How do you create an astronaut corps?
First of all, you need to have a country that's willing and interested in doing so. I've subsequent to that project, thought that how do you motivate countries to become involved in space at a country level? I suspect if you went around the world now, there'd be an awful lot of defence, an awful lot of satellite-related, telecoms, monitoring, agriculture and stuff. But how do you get people involved, the population? I think you offer them the opportunity to become an astronaut. If you said to, if you took a random sample at a train station and said, hands up, who wants to be an astronaut? I suspect you'd get quite a few people to stick their hands up. How do you do that at a country level? It needs a country to say, this is an aspiration we have. But I actually think that what you do is motivate a country to think, I could be an astronaut.
To what end, though? So what's the advantage of, for example, Saudi and developing an astronaut corps program? Because arguably you could say it doesn't need every big country to do it in the world to be able to achieve the aims that mankind needs to achieve, right? Be able to get off world. So what's the advantage in the government doing it?
I think for the Saudis it was a regional thing at first. You look at the big space player in the region is the UAE. They've had a number of astronauts. The Saudis have had a number of astronauts, but the UAE has been promoting and advocating for space for a fair number of years now, right? For a relatively small group of countries, they have really pushed the space boundary, and they've made no secret about their aspirations and Vision 2030 about how they want to participate and get their country to participate in space. I think it was only natural that the largest economy in the region, Saudi, and one of the larger economies actually across that whole of Asia, to say this is something we should be looking at. It's back to that, why do it? What does it? I don't think at first it doesn't do anything. Right? The Americans had a compelling reason to create the Mercury 7 Gemini program that led on to Apollo. There isn't that sort of compunction. But humanity is constantly looking to expand, right? That's just a natural facet of, we grow bigger businesses, we want a bigger house. It's just an innate thing within humans, most humans, not every human. I think when you get to that point where we recognise now that we've done most of the Earth's surface in terms of exploration. We haven't really. If you go beneath the waves, as we made clear before, there's still a tremendous amount of learning for humanity to do. What's fish stocks actually look like? We can sort of estimate, but short of being underwater and knowing, we don't know. It's a good guess. It can be a very accurate guess, but it's still a guess. But where's the next sort of frontier for humanity going? And I would suggest it's off this planet. I mean, Elon Musk has been talking about going to Mars for a decade plus. I don't think we're necessarily going to go to Mars shortly, and Artemis has just delayed humanity's first return to the moon from an American perspective for a couple of years. But I absolutely see humanity living and working in low Earth orbit, lunar occupation. Occupation's the wrong word, but we will go to the moon as humans more often, more countries, in an ever-increasing profile, because I think that's just the way humanity is. We continually expand.
Yeah, I think if you think of it, if you think of it entirely objectively, and look at, well, do we need to or do we not, right?
Well,
and in the long term, like galaxy life, long term thinking, we don't have a choice. We either leave it or we don't. We're growing. We're still growing. Unless you assume that humanity is going to die off very soon, and that's it, and nothing you can do about it, or there's never a chance of the sun dying or the planet having a catastrophic injury, then you ignore those things. We have to move off. Have you read Asimov's Foundation series?
Yeah.
I'm on the last book now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All of that era of Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. I mean, that subliminally, Hugh, pioneered what I started to believe in, be interested in. I then dropped off of that. I mean, you've got Frank Herbert, Dune, right? You've got all that. But just watch Star Trek. I think that gap between those books, Star Trek, and where we are today is still probably a number of lifetimes away. We've made it as a species, right? Exponential improvements in terms of technology, in terms of quality of life, not for everybody, but in terms of developmental stuff that we've done, healthcare, technology and healthcare, longevity, curing some diseases, looking to be able to address and cure others. But there is just this innate thing. Did you need to necessarily, bar some religious persecution, but that's been throughout the ages. You didn't need to get on the Mayflower and trog across the Atlantic to America. People chose to do it because it's just something in them. You're not just doing it as an individual family. You didn't get in a rowing boat and say, let's go. You got 3 ships worth of people who said they were being persecuted, but there is a new life. Now, is that the driver today? I don't think so. I think it's more just an innate opportunity. I think there's an innate curiosity. There's an economic driver, perhaps. People think that there's money to be made. Actually, off this planet, so not necessarily onto the moon and Mars, but you can do things like manufacturing of new pharmaceuticals, potentially in low Earth orbit. So where there's less gravity, can you induce chemicals to bond differently? Perhaps. Can you do that with alloys? Perhaps. So if we can produce new chemicals, new solutions to medical problems, treatments, why aren't we obliged to look at that? So people that I think say space, that's just an aspirational thing, you're wasting money. I think don't look past that. The money you spent on that, you could have done this. But in spending money in space, you might achieve much faster of this, whatever it is, treatment of humans, better way of growing crops, better way of making materials, for instance, that don't rely on so much of the Earth's resources.
Access to more real estate.
Absolutely. Well, what are we at now? 8.5 billion people? I mean, geez, when I went to school here in the UK, there were just over 50 plus million people, 55 million. We're now at 67. But globally, over 8.5 billion people. Do we just keep doing that? At some point, you've got to say, how are we feeding all those people? Where do they live? What's their access to water and resources? Now, that's not an excuse to just who you're sending off to the moon and beyond. But at some point, I think it's just an inevitability.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I think, in answer to that question about what you do as we get, as we're growing bigger as a global population and all the problems that brings, we kind of can't do anything about it. Really.
Yeah.
You can't. We've seen what birth control looks like in different countries. There's nothing you can really do about it except try and deal with the situation that arises because of it. And part of that is, what we're doing now, long-term thinking. How do we address these future problems instead of burying your head in the sand? But partly it's about exploration, and partly it's about risk management in a way.
I would absolutely agree. I think the thing that I still find, Hugh, is that you can have people who talk about lunar bases and about building, nuclear reactors on the moon, and they seem, and I experience it in this country, governmental authorities that just say, well, we're dealing with something in 15 years' time, 10 years' time, but we won't take the pragmatic steps to get there. Who's going to go? I say the same thing every time when I go into lots of meetings. Who do you think is going to go? And you better prepare them. You wouldn't ask somebody to go, simple example, you wouldn't say to somebody go scuba diving or join the military. Right, okay, I'm interested in doing the scuba diving. What does that entail? Am I the right person to go? Have I got something physiologically wrong with me that would prevent me being a capable scuba diver? Find that out. So everybody does a medical. And then you would absolutely expect to go through some basic training, to go through some iterative improvement training as you move up through the same as being of an astronaut. You're taking somebody off this planet where, for entirety of humanity, we've grown up on this planet. What's the psychological pressure of doing that? What's the physiological change? People might want to go just from a curiosity point of view. High net worth people have shown that they have an interest and an inclination to go, and that has fueled more and wider interest, right? Jared Isaacman recently did the first commercial spacewalk, albeit he didn't really do a spacewalk, coming out of the camp. That was a fundamental shift.
What do they do if it wasn't a spacewalk?
Well, I would suggest that a spacewalk is actually leaving a capsule in its entirety and being able to, within reason, you might be tethered to the spacecraft, but you can move around. What they did in the Polaris Dawn was open up the capsule, so everybody inside the capsule also had to be in a suit, and he effectively stepped out halfway out of the cupola. So he was half outside and half inside. But that counts as an EVA.
Really?
Well,
sounds like you're sticking your head out the window.
Slightly different than doing it down the M1, right? But yeah. Nevertheless, and I don't know that he went through a sort of 6-month long intensive astronaut training program to do that. I'm not entirely sure what his astronaut training program comprised of, but obviously sufficient preparation that he was able to carry out that exercise. But, the one individual does not a population make. The more you open up the opportunity to other people, to everyday people, lots of people will stick their hand up and say, I want to do that, but not everybody's capable. Lots of people will say that they want to be a scuba diver or join the military. Not everybody's capable. And I think that we need to move off, as you said. We need to move off, but you need to make sure that the people that want to move off are capable of moving off. You've got to prepare them. Once they're up in space, there's no getting you back down like that. It's not phone 999, get me some help. Something goes wrong. It might not be with you. It might be with somebody else. It might be with some equipment. You need people who are resilient enough, prepared enough, pragmatic enough to deal with that situation and help themselves get back down to earth. That, I think, is the reason that we advocate so much about preparation. And at the moment, it still feels like that is an aspiration for people. They know that that's coming, but they're not willing to take the step to support it.
Mm. When we did the first H hour in 2018, that was, you at the time were looking, so UK is the first site. How did Ohio come about? On the subject of exploration, of course. How did Ohio come about?
Well, you'd probably
congratulations, by the way, on that.
Well, thank you. You'd probably remember that we'd had an interest and been over to the US, to Houston and Texas, right? Naturally,
yeah.
Home of human space flight for NASA is in Houston at Johnson. So I'd been over there a couple of times, and it was actually 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, that a conversation with somebody I know led to a conversation with somebody else, a lawyer of all things, a guy called Howard Goulden. He got introduced to me by another long-term supporter and a great advocate for what we do, a guy called David Townsend. David said, you need to speak to this lawyer. And I thought, another lawyer. And why Ohio? I was familiar with Neil Armstrong, Senator John Glenn, right? Ohio, the Wright brothers.
They were from Ohio, were they?
Yeah.
Is the Glenn Research Centre named after
Senator John Glenn?
John Glenn, yeah.
Okay. First American astronaut to do an orbit around the Earth. And I thought, okay, well, there's some history, but really? Anyway, we had a meeting with some folks from something called the Ohio Aerospace Institute, John Sankovic and Kim Halisner. And then we had that as a Zoom call. Then they came over, it was a bank holiday in May of 2022. And I've got to say, a really compelling presentation. And if at the end of it they just said, if nothing else, just come and look.
They were presented to you. They wanted to attract you to
Yeah.
Ohio.
That was their role. Their role
Ah.
as an aerospace-centric, state-sponsored entity, not for profit. Their role is to encourage aerospace, space-related companies to look at Ohio as a potential base. So a bit of negotiation. Howard and I went out. Howard came with me. 11 days, and in that, within the first few days, I'd met the mayor of Cleveland. I'd met a number of significant local people. Just the willingness to engage and support and be supportive was in real stark contrast to the, I think the struggle's a strong word, but the issues we'd faced here. It feels like you're a bit of a random, and that's a bit of a dodgy idea. Why would I meet him? I might be tainted with that. You might write that up in the press report. But over there, they just embrace. That sounds like a wacky. I want to meet that individual. So we did, and then on that very first trip, the mayor of Brook Park. So Brook Park over here, we'd think of Brook Park as a suburb of London, for instance, Croydon, right? But over there, Brook Park is a city in its own right. It's where the airport in Cleveland is located. Although the airport is managed by Cleveland City, the area around it is Brook Park. Brook Park and another city called North Olmsted. But the mayor of Brook Park, himself a veteran, said, Mr. Vickers, within minutes, I promise you, within minutes, seconds of meeting, he said, Mr. Vickers, can I borrow you for a second? I'm thinking, yeah, okay. He said, just come with me. Him and I got in his car. We drove a minute and a half around the corner. He said, this is the acreage I want you to buy. This is the land I want you to buy. 12-acre site. So we shook hands. I said, okay. And I'm thinking at the time, you think, okay. And just over a year later, so last Christmas, we bought the land, and we've just continued to focus on doing that in Ohio, and continue our drive for delivering a centre here in the UK.
So is the centre in Ohio looking to be the same kind of have the same kind of features and functions and serve the same kind of markets as the one in the UK was planned for?
That's a very good question. I don't think so. Not quite. Why don't I think so? Because that sounds like I'm being vague. No, it's not going to focus on the same.
Can you explain what it's going to deliver? The reason I say it is because I know what the UK was going to deliver, so I know this. But for people listening, what are you building? What are you doing?
So we're building this series of, now I can say that because there's more than one, right? A series of extreme environment research, test, development and training facilities. Why? Because, we've just said at the beginning, humanity wants to propagate off this planet, and we need to understand our oceans better. Okay, so why do you need, in the West, why do you need better research, development centres, etc.? Because in the West we have an aged series of older facilities that are no longer fit for purpose. We don't have the skills and requisite skills and capabilities to manage those facilities. And it would be like, I would suggest that the equivalence is, I want you to build a brand new Intel style chip factory for me, please, but I've got an old warehouse that used to do a bit of woodworking before. Can you make the best of it? And you, well, no, I'm going to build a brand new facility to do brand new things in, because from the ground up we want to make it fit for purpose. So in the 21st century, going into our oceans, so underwater exploration, underwater defence, offshore energy, renewables, floating offshore wind, blue economy, blue ecology stuff, let's build a facility that's fit for purpose for doing that. It happens to be that the same pool-based facilities can work on human physiology, how do humans adapt, thrive in an underwater prolonged environment, and the same in space. Same environment we can use to train astronauts. So the US facility is going to probably more likely focus on that human and space aspirational side of things, and the UK facility more at the beginning, the marine side of things.
Who leads globally on these kind of facilities, on these extreme environment?
Currently,
facilities? Yeah, China.
China has
You
got.
said the West has got Asian facilities.
Yeah.
Has anyone not?
Has anybody got these facilities? No.
Cutting edge.
No, not in the way that we're proposing. Now, that's not to say that foreign governments haven't already started to build similar like facilities. I still believe, as much as you can gather information off the internet, that we're the only company purporting to do what we do for that spread of coverage.
Your visitor's arrived. 1 second. Hello. Wait. No. Okay. So, we were talking about Ohio. We were talking about other places in the world that have got cutting edge facilities. None of them got it.
Not of the sort that we have got or proposing, no. that's a gap, right? Fill the gap.
Yeah.
That the issue I think we found, and increasingly so, is that there's a lack of. It's easy for somebody in power to say, let me look at something 10, 15 years in advance, because I can promise you that. But doing something pragmatically to get you to that point, that's a different order of, I've got to make a commitment now. You find that a lot of people, when you ask them to step up and do something now, not so much.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's lack of ambition. It's easy, as I say, you can make promises because the people who are helping make the decision or add money to a pot aren't going to be actually bound by that decision. There's no accountability in that respect. They have to account for some money, right? In the same way, for instance, I'm not saying I'm not a supporter, but the UK government, via the UK Space Agency, have given money to Rolls-Royce to look at pioneering a small form nuclear reactor on the surface of the moon. You think, okay, great. What's that for? Well, eventual nuclear lunar base. Well, who's gonna go and occupy that? Is it just equipment or is it people as well? Because I guarantee that nothing we have on Earth at the moment today is capable of establishing a lunar base without there being people. We don't establish a base in the Antarctic without there being people. If the Antarctic base needs moving, you have to get people down there to help move it. How are you going to establish a lunar base? What's it going to do? Seismic activity? Well, great, we can send a rover to do that. So if you're going to put a lunar power station, if you're going to create a lunar power station, why aren't you preparing the way for people? But you speak to the UK Space Agency, not on their agenda.
Really?
Now, they would keep deferring and saying, well, we do all that through ESA. And you think, well, okay, where's the ESA ambition and plan that says we're going to establish a lunar presence? I think invariably what it's coming around to and why the change, the regime, that sounds again the wrong words, the governmental change, administrative change in North America is going to be very interesting to watch, because here you have a completely different take on who should be doing some of these big initiatives. Less government funded, government backed, government mandated, more private company. And I think that's about right. I think that's about time. More governments set up initiatives in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Slowly but inexorably, we turned over the sort of trials and tribulations, the exploration, the commercial opportunities in the North Sea to commercial companies. Was it mandated at first by government? Absolutely. We want to explore. There is an oil here. You have to incentivize businesses to start looking. You have to give them incentives to say, look, it's going to be costly. How can we make that worth your while? In space, it's an order of magnitude more costly and more risky. So it's been a government reserve, right? It was obviously a political battle between the Russians and the Americans to put a human on the moon first. The Americans won. The Americans have continued to dominate in space. The Russians have had some huge successes in space, right? They have throughout their history of humans going into space. The Russians have made...
Yuri was the first, was he not?
First human, first object to land on the moon from Earth, Russian.
What was it?
So lunar probe, I think. I'd say rover, a probe. Wasn't the same sort of thing as, Curiosity on Mars. But the Americans, at the same time, managed to miss the moon by 20,000 miles. That's less than 10% of the distance, but nevertheless, you'd say to somebody...
What do you mean they missed it? How do you mean?
Just their trajectory. They missed the moon entirely by 20,000 miles. The Americans attempted
with
to
an unmanned...
Yeah, a similar probe. We want to land an object on the moon, similar probe type mission, and it missed.
I've seen some worse misses on Bisley Ridge, to be honest.
But nevertheless, that's significant, right? But then, as that focus, 410,000 people worked on the Apollo moon landings. 410,000 people's effort. Only a government really could put that effort in. So that's you got the significant win at the end of the decade. Humans landed on the moon.
Why wasn't the lunar program continued by anyone?
I think by then the American population, so the people, had woken up to the sheer cost of it. There were other crises going on. We were just about to enter the oil crisis. The price of oil went through the roof. You had queues even in America to get into gas stations to fill up your car. The cost of fuel per gallon went through the roof, right? People suddenly focus on, why are we sending a couple of people at a time to the moon when we've got all these challenges here on Earth? That's something we mentioned earlier. People's justification of, but it costs so much to send people up into space. Why aren't we spending more money here on Earth? But there's a levelling off point. There's a balance at which you say, at what point do we start saying we need to spend money in space? If private companies are willing to do that, and there are investors who are willing to back it, why wouldn't you? But there comes a point. So NASA seeded the money for 3 commercial space stations. Will NASA continue to fund all 3? I don't know. Will it continue to fund any? I don't know.
So there's 3 commercial space stations up now.
No, being planned. So NASA put money into 3.
There's no commercial space stations right now.
Not at the
They
moment.
just got, there's 2 up, right? Or is there 3 up?
So there is the ISS
Yeah.
that we all love and follow. You know, that's a collaboration effectively between the Russians and the US.
Is that not falling apart?
I'll come back to that.
Okay.
The Russians and the US, right, with other contributors. So JAXA, the Japanese space agent, ESA, the Canadians, other countries have contributed money or expertise to it. The Canadians put the robotic arm up there. But nevertheless, you have this fantastic collaborative human effort. We didn't want the Chinese to take part in that, so the Chinese put their own space station up. But at the moment, there's only 2. So the Chinese space station is much, much, much smaller. It's only for Chinese astronauts at the moment. There may well be other countries that wish to join and will get the opportunity. But at the moment, the international collaboration in space on a space station is the ISS. It is scheduled. It's been scheduled to come down for a number of years, but we're now thinking 2030, 2031 latest. If the Russians, if the situation here on Earth continues to deteriorate between the Russians and the West, could you see them saying, look, let's just, disconnect between the 2 parties now? Yeah, and I think the Russians would more or less abandon their space station.
What would you take on the capsule undocking issue with the ISS last year, where the astronauts got stuck on the ISS and couldn't leave because of an issue with the module that was supposed to take them back?
So the
to
Orion
Earth,
capsule.
right?
So that's the Boeing capsule.
What happened there?
Well, they found that there's some thrusters that weren't behaving in the way that they'd anticipated. There were some other challenges, and so it was deemed safer, more pragmatic from a human perspective. We don't want to lose 2 astronauts, obviously not, to leave 2 astronauts on the ISS and just bring an unmanned capsule. Now, the capsule happened to land perfectly well. There were some heat shield issues,
They
I believe.
brought it back unmanned. did
Yeah.
they?
And it survived. Some of the thrusters didn't work. They knew perhaps in advance the thrusters weren't going to work, but they returned it safely to a undamaged, to all intents and purposes undamaged. A crew would have survived, but the risk in finding that out was deemed to be too high. So the astronauts are going to stay on the ISS now until February,
Oh, they're still out, aren't they?
when a Dragon capsule, so a SpaceX capsule, as part of the routine of sending resupply, replenishment up to the ISS and swapping crews over, then they will put on enough space that one of those capsules, a Dragon, will come back with those 2 astronauts.
Huh. I didn't realise it was a thruster issue. I thought it was a known issue because when it was docked with it, one of the things I read and watched video-wise or audio-wise was that the capsule was behaving and making noises when it was docked, which it shouldn't have been, and they didn't know what that was. So thrusters didn't make sense to me if it was not moving. I
think there was. I remember now reading about the noise issue.
Did you hear it?
I didn't hear.
Very
I heard.
strange.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, sorry, the recording. Yes, but I think that they eventually determined that was a facet of something else, rather than crikey, there is a completely unknown thing. They were able to trace back the source. I can't quite remember what, but it wasn't this. Oh, the hell, the thing's going to implode any second now.
It was a great source of conspiracy theories.
Aren't most things?
It was
Yeah.
pleasurable reading that stuff on X.
Yeah, there's always anything that anybody sort of can't fathom out. Then there's little green men are tapping on the outside of your capsule wanting in. It's not easy, right? But SpaceX have gone absolutely hats off. SpaceX in terms of a rocket that when it lands, to watch a booster landing, and now they've had the Starship land, you just have to think
Really.
it is still an absolutely wow thing. And they've managed to get their capsule up and back down repeatedly. Now, is there a complexity issue at the heart of the Boeing initiative? Boeing used some ESA. There's supposed to be a collaboration between the US and, for instance, the European Space Agency, so Boeing and some European companies, to make the Orion capsule, which is the way that the astronauts will get to the Artemis astronauts will get to the moon, for instance.
I've got a question for you. Just dropped into the live chat, and it's
Okay.
a good one. Normally, I leave these to the end. Are most people in your industry non-religious? And do you believe in God?
Wow, okay. So, no, I found an awful lot of very religious, and again, I'm not just saying Americans predominantly, I think religion still forms the backbone of an awful lot of American society. If you perhaps go to the California West Coast, is religion as prevalent? No. If you go into the middle part of America, yes. Are there a lot of scientists and people that you might be surprised at who go to church on a Sunday? Engineers, clever people that you just would think, well, I'm sure that they've not, reconciled the fact that there might not be a God with what they do. But absolutely, I've been surprised at that. It's not overt. Somebody doesn't come up to you and thrust a Bible in your hand and say, listen, you've got to put your hand on and swear to believe in this. But it's probably a surprise. Do I believe in God? I don't think I believe in the God. I grew up in the Middle East, went to Sunday school on a Sunday.
I did too, yeah.
You get that, dare I say,
not in the Middle East.
No,
but, yeah.
You don't. But you get that indoctrination, right? But then I read something very interesting by somebody who said that God is within all of us. So that characteristic, that ability to be bigger, humans wrote, whether you believe it or not, humans wrote the Bible. I think even most theologians would tell you that theologians would tell you that the Bible was written by people often tens, if not hundreds of years after the event. Now, well, where was the evidence that that person said that thing at that time? There were loads of books in the Bible that were never included in the Bible. So what we've got is a sanitized book that actually helps a certain group of people tell other people how to behave. And that happened in different places at different times. So you've got Muslim religion, you've got Judaism, you've got Christianity. Inherently, I don't think I believe in this image that's been created. But I do believe that we have this capacity within us to be better than we are.
On that subject, sort of, that's why I mentioned Asimov earlier, and I've only just literally this year I've binge read these books. I try to binge read them when I've got time to read them, which I try and make time most days. Like I said, I'm on the last book now, and two of the interesting things about them is, well, three of the interesting things, four of the interesting things. One, he's Russian, Asimov is Russian.
Yeah.
Two, he wrote most of these books, 5 of the 7. In the 40s and 50s as articles for a bit, like unbelievable.
Yep.
And the 6th and 7th book were written late 70s, early 80s. 81, I think the last one was written. But in it, so in the series, humans occupy millions of planets in the galaxy, millions of planets in the galaxy. There are trillions and trillions of human beings. Religion is seen as nonsense, religious beliefs are seen as nonsense and are very small. And, very small in terms of numbers of people or planets who actually have some kind of religion. And those that do, it's kind of a weird thing. But on the subject of time and passage of time and having stories that are based on hearsay or once fact and become, are written about tens and thousands of years later, in it, the idea that we all came from one place is like a myth believed by very few people. And the assumption is that humans evolved on multiple planets around the galaxy and then spread. And there's this one myth that we all came from one planet. And that planet was very rich and diverse in life forms like we are now. Yep. Because in the books, I don't know if you remember this, but in the books, all of the planets that we inhabit in the galaxy are all very simple in terms of life forms. There's a handful of life forms on there because they've been colonized by humans. Yeah. And there's some native life forms on there, and everything else has been introduced by humans. And the idea of Earth is, again, a complete myth. Now, we can't have all come from one place. That's crazy. Because think of all the passage of time that you've taken to get from there and expand to other planets. It's fascinating.
I think, Hugh, we sort of talked about that first time, and to me still, the fascination, when you look up at the night sky, if you have an uninterrupted, dark sky night, and you look up with a naked eye, you can see a maximum of about 10,000 stars, which is a lot, right? And you get this picture that actually the sky is not as black as you imagine. There's lots of these pinpricks of light, but all of those stars, that you can see with a naked human eye, are inside the Milky Way. Just just if you have exceptionally good vision, you may just be able to pick out a cluster of stars that's the Andromeda Galaxy. But really, you need binoculars or a telescope to really be able to pick that out. You can see the sort of edge of you've looked up in that band of stars that people say that's the edge of the Milky Way. It's not the edge, but you can see that cluster of stars that forms the Milky Way. But 10,000 stars, we're talking a tiny proportion. If there is, as people estimate, Brian Cox onwards estimate 100 million or even 100 billion. Right? Think of 100 million.
Yeah.
Or people talk about 100 billion stars just in the Milky Way, just in our galaxy. And we see 10,000. Even if it's only 100 million. I mean, you think, bloody hell.
Blows the mind.
So the ability for humanity to colonise like that, I think you must be talking thousands a year. There's a short story, I meant to bring it, and I didn't bring it, about a computer, about the search for the meaning of life. You've got to, I'll find it.
What's
and
the
I'll
book
send
called?
it.
Who wrote it?
Oh.
John, I need answers.
I know. I'm going to send you I'm going to find the
Who
article.
created us?
It is literally a short story about people searching for the meaning of life. And eventually they create this, I don't want to spoil it, right? But they create a computer.
Yeah.
Which eventually gives you the meaning of life. But it's a real twist at the end. A real twist. It's a twist.
You're not talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No. Similar, but shorter.
A computer.
Doesn't
Just
come across
Google it
with
now.
bulldozers at the beginning for a start.
Computer book. Okay, I'm just Googling it.
Meaning of life, short story. It's thousands of years, this thing. They build a computer and iterations of computers to find the meaning of life.
Don't know. I'll have to find it out.
Well, I'll find it, right. But there you've got this paradoxical thing. I mean, humans traversing.
It's not man's search for meaning, is it? No.
Might be like something like that, right? It's a real, you read it and it's almost a repeat of itself, and then you get to this final point. But I mean, just the size of the thing. At modern speeds, the quickest we can get to Mars with modern technology is about 3 months. On average, it's more like six months. To go there and back in a reasonable time frame. I land people on Mars and then get back 2 years minimum. I mean, right? Nobody thinks of when you watch a program. We just watch, Interstellar, or you watch The Martian, or you watch a Star Trek program. People get in a spacecraft, push the go button. 2 seconds later, they're pushing a stop button, and they all stop. Well, without, as in Star Trek, that inertial damping. Can you imagine? It's like being in a car and saying you just accelerated and you didn't feel anything, and then you stopped. Well, that's impossible. But they go from 0 to whatever warp factor in the space of a heartbeat, and nobody's squashed up against the back wall. I mean, it's just the universe is huge. The galaxy is huge. The solar system is pretty large. So that I would suggest that within our lifetimes, and I'm older than you, we will genuinely be living in low Earth orbit on the moon. At mass, maybe not quite, but within a couple of generations, yes. But our ability to expand, unless we get that technological innovation that enables us to travel much faster, it's not just the acceleration. You can actually probably get a human space vehicle to get up to a reasonable speed percentage, the speed of light. But for every speed increment you go up, for every acceleration, there's an equivalent of deceleration. You've got to slow it down. I mean, you don't ever see space vehicles slowing down. They just stop. And that just to get to, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years to get to the nearest sun at modern speeds. So Proxima Centauri. That's a long time, right? So I think if we're going to find anybody else out there, and I would tell you right now that I think there are other advanced alien life forms spread throughout the universe. There's now parts of the universe that we will never see because they're accelerating
faster than we can get to them.
Faster than the light can get back from them to us. What? I do think there's an arrogance that says we're the only species. I mean, come on.
I think people who think that it's either they haven't thought about it, or maybe they don't need to, maybe they don't want to get it, or they have thought it and they're ignorant to what it means, to what infinity actually means, and the scales of numbers. You were talking earlier about you were talking about 100 million, and you said 100 billion. And when you say those words and you see those words written down, you think, and even when you write them as numbers, you think they're not that far apart.
Yeah.
100 billion is as far up is a lot further apart from 100 million. 100 million is from zero. There's
Well, you can count to naught to
the
a million.
scale boggles the mind.
Well, you can count from naught to a million at one number a second in 15 days, 12 days, 15 days, right?
So you can count from naught
So
to a million in
1,
15
2,
days.
3, yeah.
Okay.
So let's say 15 days. Somebody will pick me up. I'm sure it'll be 12 or 15. To do the same thing, 1, 2, 3 to a billion, 32 years.
Crazy, isn't it? Crazy.
I mean, when you actually write that down, you think, you know, it used to be that a British billion was a million. An American billion was always 1,000 million. So people have become billionaires using the American system increasingly regularly. Nobody's yet become a British billionaire, if you go back to that old definition of a million.
I didn't know there was that difference. I did not know there was that difference.
I don't know when it got dropped, but yeah. But that time... Now, what are we saying? What is the point of that? I absolutely would tell you, have we been visited by aliens? I would suggest not. You don't cross. So we've been broadcasting signals, radio waves off this planet, deliberately or not, since the 1920s. In that time, so you've talking what, 80, 90 years? 90 years, right? That maybe nearly 100 years that we've been sending radio signals off this planet. And in that time, at the speed of light, they've gone 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
So at the speed of light, the nearest star is 4.5 years away, right? Traveling at the speed of light. So we've probably sent a signal. We have sent a signal way past there, but we haven't seen any discernible response from there or anywhere else. There have been some anomalies we've picked up on, but that's people make these huge leaps that peaks in sort of signal coming back from SETI. That must point to evidence of human of intelligent activity. But you're talking about, imagine an ant going into Wembley Stadium. There's bound to be a noise, door flapping somewhere, a flag cracking. An ant eventually might hear one of those sounds, but it couldn't determine where that sound was coming from. Where it was completely natural. So we are in such a vast universe. It's mind-boggling. You are bound to get noises, sounds, lights that might be created, deliberately or not. But we're desperate to find out proof. But I don't know that we will.
So I don't know if we talked about this before. I think we have privately, but maybe not on the podcast. So what do you think about all of the evidence for extraterrestrial activity, UFOs on Earth since the late 40s, early 50s?
Why then? Why not before then?
Well, they would say, so the people who support these theories, they would say that the most likely reason is because that is the start of significant nuclear activity by us.
And there are drawings and stuff throughout ancient history that people have pointed to. There were Middle Ages, ancient Egypt, etc. That people have pointed to and said that's representative of a UFO. That wasn't a picture of the sun or a comet. But then the ancient Egyptians believed that the sun was pulled by a chariot, the sun god Ra, every morning and disappeared at dusk and went round.
But you've got much better evidence recently, again, 40s, 50s, and even into the noughties and into the 2010s, right?
I can't categorically say no, but I would suggest that size thing is as much a challenge for other species as it is for us. Would you go all the way? How did they know to arrive in the 40s? So they've been observing us. Well, where are they? I mean, it's one of those, it's self-fulfilling. Well, you can't prove it, so it must be. And I think, well, okay. But it's just as much of a distance for these other entities as it is for us. Space doesn't suddenly shrink. Now, there's obviously this thought about wormholes and about the ability for advanced space travel to be that you shrink the universe, the space in front of you, and then expand it behind you. Have you heard of that theory?
This is the gravity drive kind of thing, right?
Well, whether it's gravity drive or
Which explains which solves the inertia issue of getting squashed.
Potentially, you're not necessarily traveling through. You're shrinking space so that you travel through a much smaller. Yes, right. I don't pretend to understand the physics of it, but that's the. Now, if an alien life form had developed that sort of technology, in the randomness of the universe, where there are probably trillions of planets, how did they arrive at ours? We are a speck on a speck of an arm on one particular galaxy.
Unless they got some other connection to us.
Yeah, possibly. This is taking a twist.
They have a vested interest in what we do and how we survive.
Yeah, possibly. I remember in a comic, you won't remember the comic called, was it called 2000 AD?
I remember the comic. My cousin, who was 8 years older than me, when I was about, I don't know, I was maybe 10 years old, maybe younger, and he gave me a stack of 2000 AD, and I thought all my Christmases had come at once. I was like, what are these? What are these?
Judge Dredd, right? All of those.
So good. I still got them.
Well, there was one particular short story, and it was fascinating about that this human crew in a starship. It looked like Starship Enterprise, I think, if I remember rightly. Had programmed a computer to wake them up when they approached the edge of the universe, and this whatever it was computer woke them up and said, we've approached the end of the universe, and they look out and they said, just looks the same. How's it determine that? And the very end picture was of some alien life form looking in a microscope at a drop of water. And I thought, wow. Now, it blew my little mind for a while I thought about it, and then I gave it up. But that absolutely, the scale of it is unimaginable. I think that's the trouble we have as humans. We sort of, like you said about the numbers, we shrink them till we can manage it. But the distance is huge.
Yeah, I agree with that. Going back to the UFO thing, there's questions rolling you and you're on the live. I'm going to bring him up. Is that there is a theory, and this ties in with what I believe is most realistically the case, is that they're not off-world, they're not from another planet, they're here already, because they're us from the future.
Okay.
Which is why the interest, right? And that ties in with a lot of the evidence of the sightings and first-hand. You got like Commander David Fravor and people like this who are literally naval. U.S. naval officers, highly regarded, and giving this evidence of what they've seen, and you got all the radar, all the rest of that stuff. But there is a theory that I tend to subscribe to, is that if it is, this is the most likely one, I think, is that they're deep sea, they are already here, and they are having monitors, like you say. We started messing around with nukes in the 40s and 50s, and for some reason they want us to stop doing that. And I think it's because I asked the same question that you pointed to, and said, why would they bother?
Yeah.
And I think, well, because if we get it wrong, it really impacts them. Maybe that's because they are us from the future, or they are us in a parallel universe, or whatever else. So one of the things I've been asked to do here is, what does John think of Hugh's UFO story? I didn't think we were going on UFOs in this conversation, by the way. What does John think of Hugh's UFO story? Hugh, could you tell him? I think I may have told you this story.
Go on.
The Iranian border. So I was in Iraq when this happened in 2012-ish, when this particular instance occurred. I'm on an oil rig, as in obviously on land oil rig, about 5k from the Iranian border. And there's 3 oil rigs within proximity of each other, between 3 to 5k from each other. On each oil rig is about 120, 130 people. A mix of local nationals, Canadians, British, and maybe some Indians there as well. Nighttime. It's very dark. Obviously, oil rigs got lit, but the night sky is very dark because there's not much light pollution. Long story short, everyone, probably between the 3 oil rigs, there were probably 100 plus people, because not everyone was awake. There's the 300, 400 people in total on the 3 oil rigs, but I think across the 3 oil rigs, maybe 100 plus people saw this, and it was. I got called outside by the local nationals who were on my team to look up, and there was a light in the sky, and it was static. It was still, and I would describe it as it was a circular light, like a torchlight,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it seemed to be high in the sky, but not like 30,000 feet. I'm going to ballpark it and say anywhere between 500 feet and 4,000. Obviously, it's nighttime, it's hard to tell. I don't know why it seemed low, but that's what it seemed. And it seemed to be casting a light onto what seemed to be a cloud. It was like almost like the shape of a beam onto a cloud, except it was a cloudless night.
Okay.
And the cloud started getting larger as if it was moving towards us and getting bigger, like gas expanding, sort of. And the light started getting bigger. And then the light started, it's at the same point in the sky here, John. It's not moving left, right, it's not moving up, down. And also, there's no sound. There's not a helicopter sound, there's no plane sound, there's no nothing. This is soundless. And then the light started oscillating. It started like spinning like a galaxy. So arms started coming off it as if it was a spinning ball of liquid, and then like these because of the momentum, arms start coming off it. So it looked like a spinning galaxy. It started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as if it was coming closer, and this cloud thing was coming closer, bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until it disappeared. No sound, no nothing. Didn't change position in the sky. I wasn't the only person that saw it. Like lots and lots and lots of us saw it. What do you think that was?
Well, I tell you, one of my nieces, I have no reason to doubt either, tells a story in Suffolk. She was driving back around Bury St Edmunds sort of area, and she claims
there's aliens on land around there.
Right? I didn't say that. And if I remember, I'm trying to remember the story. Railway, so it was obviously on the road in a car, field. I'm sure there was a railway bridge or a railway, and this object, which she claimed appeared, so hovered, multiple coloured lights, not insignificant, a fair size of thing, just hovered. Lots of people's car, so it wasn't just her. And look, you've got to believe me, stopped and watched and observed this same phenomena. Now, I'd have to get her and ask her the rest of the detail. I'm always fascinated by people who have got and think, wow, I have no idea.
Well, what I saw was replicated. So I went, it was the only thing I've ever seen that I couldn't explain. Like, it blew my mind. And I went in that night into my room thinking, I don't understand. I was trying to work it all out. I just missed everything, not playing on a helicopter, everything I just explained to you. What the hell was it? And then I went online. There was something about it could be like a failed missile launch, but there was no sound. There was nothing. You would have heard an explosion. You would have seen a flash, And when I was trolling that night online, there was footage from, I think it was Norway. It was footage from the 90s. It was a news report of UFO sighting over Norway. Exactly the same thing that we all saw in Iraq, Iran, 2012. And I'll after this, I'll send you the link to that, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because it is wild. You go, what the heck is that? It's not it was huge, but the problem is with the UFO stuff. How many people lie, make stuff up?
And that's part of the challenge, and rightly so, right? We're cynical, so humans are naturally curious and probably, especially if they're British, naturally cynical, right? About whatever, how many drinks you had, etc. I was a big proponent of UFOs, not proponent. I didn't go around standing on street corners shouting, they're visiting, they're amongst us. And then more recently, that whole scale thing has just hit me, and I thought, it's just so big. I don't think they were going to just journey across billions of miles, thousands of light years, tens of light years from somewhere else, and just arrive and hover just above a particular area in, the Nevada desert, Area 51. I didn't think there was a sign.
Not just there, though.
No, and I accept. But if you look at where the majority of sightings are, there are clusters, and they tend to be in the same area. So at some point, roll with it a second.
They're the famous ones. They're the ones that got really publicised. But they're all over America, they're Russia and the China. As in, I don't mean just those countries, but they're across the board when you look at the science.
Yeah, but nowhere near the same sort of parts
and
of Africa.
Disruption to nuclear facilities.
Yeah, And I think then it gets into an area that I just think, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. All I can sort of argue with and stand here and say is that I'm fascinated by the opportunity that if there are aliens, right? An alien just means when they're not human. They may be human. We may, as you said. I mean, I was reading an article. There was an article a minute ago I was going to read to you, reference about something, and I can't remember that either now. But that humans, that the ingredients for life were not on Earth. If you follow how planets are formed, bits of rock start to drag together, start spinning, drag in more, eventually you get a planet. The ingredients necessarily for life are not there. They're failed stars, so there was already a star. So what else was around the star? Comets with water, comets with bacteria or bacterial-like substances, chemicals on them, that they found an environment, Earth, and on this planet those things came together. But what stopped them just being individual chemicals?
Well, they tried to recreate this. The year before last, they tried to do this, didn't they? So that there's this. The theory is, in terms of like the evolution of life on Earth, not just us human beings, but life, is that it was a chemical. It was a chemical soup. Earth is a chemical soup, is how they describe it. In the ocean, chemical soup. The right things happen at the right time, and the stars aligned, so to speak, and life started. The first life form, the amoeba, a single cell life form started, and from that everything else came. They tried to recreate this the year before last, didn't they? I say the year before last. That's what I read about it. Is that they simulated the chemical soup that would have been present on Earth when this supposedly happened, and what the research, what their findings were, that there was no possible way that it could be created without artificial intervention, without an intervention from something of some kind. All the probability in the world and all the chance in the world couldn't bring together the circumstances that were needed to create the first life form. You have to intervene and change something in the chemical soup artificially.
I remember I don't think it was H.G. Wells, but I remember a story that, again, it might have been H.G. Wells, who wrote about, a science experiment. It was to do with fruit flies, and they recreated life. Now, nobody, as far as I'm aware, has managed to, in any shape or form, recreate life. What is it that takes just a soup of something, these chemicals, these simple building blocks, and what is it that actually sparks life? Self-replicating, ability to move. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a lichen was right. You wouldn't. You would look at a lichen or a virus and say it's not a life form, but we qualify them as life form. Mm-hmm. So there are different. I'm just being facetious because obviously lichen qualify in other ways, but you can't actually. We have, despite, as you rightly said, with all that knowledge and capability, we have never yet managed to recreate a single-celled organism at its very most basic level. Yet there are bacteria. And then you get to one of my favourite creatures of all time, the tardigrade, water bears, which have survived on the outside of the ISS. I think like 10 years.
Tardigrade from you, actually. Yeah.
I mean, they're tough little so-and-sos, right? The outside, they're completely desiccated. To all intents and purposes, that is a husk. That's like finding one of those silverfish, underneath your floorboard. Thing is a dried up husk. That's just add water. A bit like, what was it, Gremlins, don't feed after midnight. Add water, thing gets up and swims off. I mean, what a capable. So the opportunity for life to have come to this planet, absolutely. There are rocks in Australia off the coast. For the life of me, again, the words just gone out of my head. But there are rocks with very simplistic life forms, or bacterial type of life. Some of those rocks, they reckon, are, if not billions, hundreds of millions, if not billion-year old. So continual life form. Now, did they just arrange as a soup? What was it that changed their environment that one of those simple cells and organisms thought, sod this, I need a tail? Or another one thought, I'll just climb out the pond. That is very difficult to follow because the proposition is from the ingredients to form one form of life, we spurn all these million. Now I'm getting into the wrong sort of theory here.
Yeah, but then that's evolutionary biology, which is different.
Does it all come from one particular source? And evolution is driven by environmental circumstances. So Darwin proved it. The finches on the Galapagos changed their beaks. The tortoises, different neck shapes. Yeah, I absolutely agree that evolution has a focus. But if you get some single-celled organism Did one start and then split and became two? What was the driver? If you actually just still it down and say, okay, there were the ingredients where somebody or something else interfered, or this soup somehow got hit by a lightning bolt, there were the right conditions, they aligned themselves, and suddenly this thing is now alive in the way that we would recognise and starts replicating. But you put that thing, jelly, algae, whatever, bacteria in those conditions, what started it evolving? Because it would have had to have been a long time. So life either started
It was a
much
long time
earlier,
ago.
yeah, but even though, I mean, several billion years, and you've got this diversity of life, I personally think there must have been other impetus, other creation opportunities that started the spread of different types of life form.
You mean intervention from something else?
Likely. Because if you put one single-celled organism in the right medium on a test laboratory, the plates you put in laboratories, right? And you spread some bacteria and they grow.
What are they called?
Anyway. But if you put them as soon as they grow outside that food source, if there's no more of that food for them to grow on, they stop growing. Penicillin will only grow on if it's got a food source. Bacteria, humans, if you take away the compulsion and the ability for it to cultivate food, it can't grow. So at some point in that pond or in that ocean, you've got this organism that's spilling over and multiplying. Now, there could have absolutely been an adaptation or a requirement that one part of it, but it's just a fascination that one part of it adapted because of some sort of circumstances. But that minutiae of change, i.e., you've got to find a way of creating life in the beginning. A very simplistic life has gone and evolved, come up against a set of circumstances which has caused it to evolve. And eventually, within a relatively short space of time of when we think life erupted on Earth, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of different species.
Petri dish.
Thank you. Well done. Somebody just wrote that down, didn't it?
That has been breaking me for the last 30 seconds.
I know, and then there's too many concepts for me to deal with. But, suddenly when we actually look at the proliferation of life, before we often find a lot of fossil evidence, how did you get armoured fish? Where was the first fish? Where was the first jellyfish? Where was the single organism that spurned those on? It must have been going on a long time.
Yeah, you can trace all that back.
To one single organism. So on one side you're telling me that there's, we're being visited, and then you say,
I
we
didn't
can
say that.
No, but you said there were people here already, people from the future.
I said if.
Oh,
so
okay.
Be careful here. Be careful.
If.
I said if it's to be believed, I think not from off the world. I think they're here already.
And
they've always been here, maybe.
Then maybe let me put an if in. We have got such a spread of life that when it first was created here on Earth, if that's how it started, what spurned that single entity, bacteria, single-celled organism, what spurned that to then diversify such that you've got bony fish, you've got trilobites, you've got creatures that were then saying, actually, if I live nearer the surface, I can breathe some of that gas. It just seems such a
You could argue it's just a different kind of reaction to the Big Bang, right? Why have we got suns? Why have we got black holes? Why have we got moons? Why have we got planets? Why have we got photons?
Did you see recently? Somebody has theorized. They drew a picture of what they think of an individual photon of light looks like.
Really?
Looks like a lemon. It was phenomenal. And now they've in the same way that you haven't actually been able to photograph an actual black hole, what we've done is take lots of data and amalgamate it, and then said that's the best representation this data gives us. We can translate that data into being a visual thing. They did the same thing about this in a single photon of light, and it looks like a lemon, because a photon can be both a particle and a wave. I'm just getting
it's wild, isn't it, when you get to that other side? So, a photon's a real thing, but it can go through glass. It can go through objects. Yeah. Radio waves. Radio waves are a real thing.
Yeah.
But
it's just another form of...
what are you talking about? It's just, question. When you were Queen's Regiment, right?
Yeah.
When you were just getting ready to leave, what did you think your career was going to be?
Not this. I was at Queen Elizabeth Military Hospital in Woolwich getting my medical discharge because they'd screwed up. And I had a chat with an artillery captain who I think it looked obvious. He didn't want to be there, and I didn't want to be there, but it was a step we both had to take.
He was leaving as well.
No, he was giving me the exit interview, right?
Right.
You had to have an officer give you an exit interview, and so I got my little red Chairman Mao book, which said that I've told you this before. Says that I'm capable of being a petrol
This is
station
your
attendant.
testimonial to leave.
Yeah, petrol station attendant, unsupervised. That was a bit I thought that was impressive. I could be unsupervised. I don't know whether for long periods of time, but anyway. And I said, I'm going to be a management consultant. And he said, what's that? And I thought, please don't. He didn't actually say that. He just looked at me as if to say, what's that? And I'm thinking, don't ask me that. I really don't know. So he just looked at me and sort of went, okay. I could have written to him in the first year and said, I've done it, whatever that was. So no, I didn't think about it. I was always interested in water. I was always interested in space. And I said to my wife, Helen, in 2014, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been commuting up and down to the city. I want to do this. And I outlined the plan for Blue Abyss. Before I knew, she gave it the name. I didn't just build a big pool. Yeah.
Helen gave it the name?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She said, yeah, why don't you call it Blue Abyss? And I thought about it. I've only ever had one person say that's a rubbish name.
Who was that? It wasn't me, was it?
No. I won't say his
I
name.
was joking.
There's another military guy who said, oh, no, people are going to think, falling into the abyss. And I thought, So nobody else has ever said anything. And I thought, no, it's absolutely appropriate. So no, I wouldn't have said.
Of all the people you've met, right, in the industry so far, who is the one that sticks in your mind most, and your most, your pride and starstruck maybe with who you've met? Because you've met some amazing people.
I'm very fortunate.
I wish I'd met, and I'm very jealous. Yeah.
I mean, astronauts, famous explorers.
One person.
Okay, I would say that the person that had the most effect, that I would still today think, I met, was the last astronaut on the moon, Eugene Cernan. Because I'd been doing it about 9 months, been doing Blue Abyss for about 9 months. On the 1st of April 2015, I'd put it on Facebook, like a muppet, 1st of April.
Facebook, innit?
Yeah, right.
Old school. Build a Facebook. What are you going to do? Commercial Astronaut Training Centre? Where do I start? Facebook page, mate.
And on the 1st of April, that went down. Oh, look, right?
Oh, was it the 1st of April?
Yeah, literally.
Brilliant.
And you think,
Brilliant.
I'll never do that. There's some things you need to observe around first before you. And but after about 9 months, so October 2014 into August 2015, sorry, I'm off to an event in London. Somebody says, come and meet, or hear a story. Hear this last guy who's walked on the moon. And I'm thinking, wow, it's going to be an auditorium. There's going to be hundreds of people. But I'm just going to go. At the end of it, I'm just going to write on Facebook, I'm not doing this anymore. This is a rubbish idea. And I went to an event first.
You were going to switch it off?
Yeah, totally.
Were you?
Totally. Oh, absolutely. I thought, what a stupid idea. What a stupid idiot. Who's going to believe this?
Initially, I know that you thought you were looking at 15, 20 million, right?
Yeah.
I think your initial estimate was.
Yeah.
A little bit out.
Just a smidgen. That's just my pay packet. Yeah. Eventually. Not at the moment. That's another factor out, right? But I went to an event at the is it City Hall? The big London where the Mayor Ken Livingstone used to be there, right? And I watched a guy. I had a meeting with somebody, and this guy, and he had some playing cards. They looked like playing cards, and he pointed his phone camera at them, and you got augmented reality.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, wow, fantastic.
Like Bob?
No, a completely different guy. I've lost track. And I took a pack of these cards, put them in my pocket. I thought, right, I'll go over because it's only across the water, across the bridge. Got into Portcullis House, sat there thinking, how many people is this going to be? And I'm thinking it's going to be hundreds, and I'm just going to be at the back, and I'll just slip out at the end and say, that was great, thanks very much for the opportunity. And I got in this room. I was sat next to Dallas Campbell, TV personality, and he had a stack of posters, and I'm thinking, what's he going to do there? And I'm thinking, well, where's all these other people then? I think there must have been a maximum of 25 people in this room. And I'm thinking, Jesus, something wrong here. Are we just going to watch a film then? And then, 10 or 15 minutes later, Gene Cernan walks in the room, and I'm looking thinking, bloody hell, that guy actually walked on the moon. He's that, wow, right? And at the end of this talk, and the thing that struck me a bit during is I was determined, that was it, I was giving up, was him saying, he wasn't having a go at us in the room, but he was saying they thought, the Apollo astronauts thought that by the 80s, they would be on the moon. We humans would be on the moon. We'd be colonising the moon. Mars.
Oh.
by the 1980s. I mean, so they didn't know that come 1974 that they'd called it a day. They thought that we would be carrying on, and that by the early mid 80s we would be on Mars. Forget the moon. The moon would be old hat by then. So I think it was a disappointment to all of them.
Buzz Aldrin's pretty bitter about it, isn't he?
Right. We gave up.
Rightly so, I think.
Yeah. And Gene Cernan seemed to imply the same sort of, we thought we were the vanguard of a wave of humans propagating out, being adventurous, being curious, pushing boundaries. And here we are, last moon thing, give it up. 1972, in fact, 1974. 72, we just say that's it. We're not going to go back. That's it, we've done, cancel the... So Apollo... 17, 18, done. Thanks very much. We've had it. We're not going to go any further. And he's telling the room this, and I'm thinking, okay, wow, maybe we should. This is more than me just saying an idea, I thought. And then somebody said, would you like to meet him? Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you? And Dallas said, I said, what are you going to do with those posters? I'm going to get him to sign them. I'm thinking, I better get in the queue first, because that's a lot of posters. Could be here all night. So I got in the queue and I'm thinking, what do you actually say? What do you say to an Apollo astronaut? I'm going to create an astronaut training centre. Of course you are. And I'm rehearsing this, and I'm in the queue, and I genuinely, as I've said it before, I felt like I was 7 years old, and he looked at least 8 foot tall. He was a big guy. He wasn't. He was an old man. He was my height, but he did have a really strong handshake.
Isn't it amazing the way your perception can change how you physically think someone appears to you? I've done the same.
And I felt 7.
At looking at their height or things like that and gone, what? He was huge compared to me. Huge. And then you realise, no, it's just the perception I had of that individual.
The Marine I mentioned to you earlier, he was huge unit, but this Gene Cernan, not so much. Old guy. He shook my hand, a really firm handshake. He said, what are you doing? And I said, well, my intention is to build the world's first commercial astronaut training centre. He said, so you're building a facility. That's amazing. Never give up. Now, I don't know what that could be everybody would rightly say, but it's just a bland statement. He just said that. But to me, it seemed completely prophetic. He was saying to you,
as you were thinking about leaving,
I know what you're doing. What you're doing is unique, special. Do not give up. That's the only quality I've been able to say. Every time that I thought, sheesh, another year, or how many more steps are we going to have to take? What's the difference? Where's the tipping point? I just keep thinking, don't give up. That's hard. I was thinking about if you asked me the question. It's just like being on a treadmill, and you're going nowhere. To a degree, when you're doing it, I can tell you now, it feels like you're going nowhere. Now look back over 10 years, and the things we've achieved, the people, the contracts we've the Saudis. We're lining more sort of opportunities like that up. We're now talking Cleveland and Cornwall. We're talking about other centres in the US.
You mentioned the space agency thing?
I've signed an agreement. I'm waiting for...
I didn't say which one.
No.
So you can step away from this part of the conversation if you want.
I'll say that I've signed an agreement that we're waiting for the other counter-signature for. It's been agreed. I won't finish the rest of it, but in doing so, I would never have said 10 years ago, well, I didn't know that sort of agreement existed, but we're signing it. So effectively, it will publicise and formalise our relationship with a certain space agency.
One of the things I thought, seeing you go through the journey, like this journey that you've been on up to this point, so 9 years now, right?
No, 10 years.
10 years.
10 years and a bit.
Is that, the nature of the beast, and when you're looking to fund anything, and then when you're looking to, get support and investment in something that is like, it's disruptive, it's different, it's to a lot of people it's blue sky thinking, to a lot of people it's way off, to a lot of people it's unnecessary, but obviously, I agree with you, it's absolutely necessary what you're doing. Is that what comes with that is constant repetition of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
How did you cope with that? How have you coped with that over time? Because I know how many doors you've had closed in your face. I know, and they're opening now, which is amazing. Which is, I said to you when you announced some news last week, and then again, this one earlier on today. So happy for you,
Thank
But
you.
that's partly because I know the journey you've been through. How do you deal with the rejection, though? 'Cause that's the reality of people going out and seeking investment in anything.
Yeah.
If people who are listening to this and they're young entrepreneurial people trying to build something and they need money to fund it, they're going to get their doors slammed in their face constantly until one eventually opens up.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say that it's not necessarily young people. People are going to get I've read somewhere, again, books you read, that most success only comes when people are in their 40s or even 50s, because by then you develop either the network, you develop the financial resilience, i.e. you have money behind you, or you develop the tenacity to just keep going. You know what it was like. You put a load of kit on your back and you just tabbing away. It could be a nighttime exercise. It could be in basic training. And somebody says, right, we've got to do a tab, and you have no idea it's going to be a 20 miler, right? And you just got I remember one, Bergen on GPMG around my neck. In the end, after about an hour of tabbing, my neck was sort of parallel to the ground. That flipping thing, nobody would take the GPMG off me. It's just one foot in front of the other. And, it just became a burden, right? Because he just got treated like, well, you're a crow, right? You just got beasted to, you're just scrap, right? And so in the end, you're just doing something. At first, it was Andy Torbett and a lady called Emma Farrell said to me, stop reading forums and people's opinion. As I tell Benedict.
What were you doing? What do you mean?
Why I'd be going on a forum, a
both
dive
cracking
forum.
People, by the way.
Say again.
Both cracking.
Absolutely.
Andy's obviously been on the podcast.
Well, right. Yes, absolutely. You need to get Emma on. That I would be reading what other people would be saying, and I'd be taking it personally. You can't. Everybody's entitled to an opinion.
They were commenting on Blue Abyss.
Yeah.
Right.
About and having an opinion or a view or what we'd be doing. I'm thinking, well, I've never spoken to you. How do you know it's going to be doing that then?
I've seen some of these repetitive morons over the years comment on this.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I want to get hold of them and go, get a life. Get a life. Have some belief. How about support a guy and not just keep kicking him?
Well, there's that saying, isn't it? The people saying it can't be done should get out of the way of people doing it. And I probably read that and never thought anything of it until I'm thinking, actually, that might, what? If you've got nothing positive to say nothing.
The reality is, there are people out there that don't like other people succeeding. They don't like other people even trying to succeed.
Yeah.
They don't like it. And that's because of their own flaws in themselves, for whatever reason.
And that I've noticed in America, Hugh, is completely different. More people want you to be successful, even if they're not part of it. So there is this fundamental change. We talk about Americans and entrepreneurialism and changes. The mayor is effectively a commercial person in the US. In Brook Park, it's just been nothing but this will do well for you, and actually it has an impact for me. Now, he could help us with the land, right? We did a phenomenal deal thanks to his support and input. But it's never going to be him personally that benefits in that respect. Yet he couldn't be more supportive. Everybody I've met in the US, I think have I ever met somebody that's been negative? I don't think so. But you meet politicians. Last week I was in Cleveland and giving a presentation to the Ohio State Senate. Everybody was so graciously supportive. They might not be interested at all. They might never see or hear anything about it again, but they couldn't say enough. And you might think, well, that's just them being polite. But they actually go out of their way to be politely positive then, or positively polite. And I'd rather that than someone. So I stopped listening to people. And somebody recently sent me an article from the Harvard Business Review about, here we go. I don't like talking about it. It's a very British thing not to talk about ourselves, right? And to big up what you're doing. But it talked about visionary entrepreneurial people. And it listed qualities. And then it listed the negative side of being like that. And I thought, I think that I can mitigate some of the negative qualities because I grew up in the army. I saw what the army could offer me: resilience, determination, focus. It's like project management. I said when I first came out of the army, people said, what are you qualified in? I said, well, I'm a project manager. They said, well, how do you figure that out? I said, everything in the army is like a project. If you've got an objective to take, there's a known goal, you've got a number of resources, you've got a time frame in which to do it. I just said it's just shifting the mentality of what you've been doing from I've got to take out that bunker into a commercial sense. It's the same discipline, the same approach, it's the same methodology in a sense. And I thought, so I mitigated about because I was reading the article and it said, well, entrepreneurial people don't listen, do this. And I thought I can mitigate some of that. So have I come up with something that's different? Yeah, because I think that governments used to do what we're doing. The West, the world is short of facilities that help humanity move on. If you're going to do new, demanding, extraordinary things, you need new, demanding and extraordinary facilities in which to do them. And if you can today enable more people to do that individually and collaboratively, then you've got an even better proposition. And that's what we're doing. So I don't know where it comes. I look at Ian Mackay's picture every day when I walk in. I don't overtly think, thanks Ian for keeping me going. I don't say, thank you Gene, thank you very much here. Another votive offering because Gene's Cernan talk. But it's embedded. It's a choice, isn't it? I don't know what keeps me going. If it wasn't for people, friends and family, I'd have given up.
Yeah, I think also though, maybe it's all. I think when you fully commit to something. So at that point, you met Gene. You know, you were probably in a state of flux. I want to bin this. Not sure about it. And then that one word from the right person at the right time. It's like, fuck it. And you, at that point, probably fully committed. That's it. I'm doing this no matter what. I think when you get into that mindset of full commitment, and that mindset can be dangerous. That can be all destroying.
Yeah.
You know, it will make you or break you, literally. But when you commit to that mindset, I think that's where great things come from. But also, I think the level of resilience goes up one. In your terms of being able to take the crap that's going to come at you. But I think because in order to commit to something like that, to make a decision, you have to acknowledge that you're going to get nonsense thrown at you. There's going to be hard things come your way, and you're going to have to deal with all of them and just believe in yourself that you'll overcome them. You know, whether that's section attack in the Falklands or Afghanistan or wherever, or it's a 50 miler or it's starting a new business. If you're going to go and do something as big as that is going to be the defining moment in your life or your career at that moment, that you achieve it, when you achieve it, you can't do that without full commitment. You know, you cannot do it. And I've given your example to other people, and when they are on a journey or making a decision on starting a business or not, and it's also something I've learned over time, as well as watching you, is that you can't create successful, complex endeavors which require multiple resources, multiple people to be motivated, all have a common vision, common goal, common focus to create this thing. You can't do that unless yourself are fully committed and willing to put everything on the line and willing to sacrifice an easy life or even a moderately easy life to be able to achieve that. Again, I know exactly what you've been through for the last 10 years. I know exactly, and it's commitment from yourself. It has to be. I mean, would you disagree with that?
No, and I'm always a bit uncomfortable with people saying it, because I've put other people through that as well. Family, ostensibly, right? I've had people, support, and I've always felt guilty that I haven't been able to achieve more sooner. And that sits with me. It sits uncomfortably. Now, I'd like to think that I'm going to pay everybody back that supported me in whatever way that is, right? It could be salary, it could be shares, it could just be thank you very much indeed on the back of a postcard. But I remember everybody that's helped me. I don't remember the people that haven't. I would liken it back to that simplistic. It might be simplistic. People say, but project management is a lot like a section attack. But it is the same concept. If you distill it down, a project is a known start date, a known quantity, and a known end date of an objective. You have a set number of resources. You have to analyse how those resources are going to be used in order to achieve your objective.
To follow.
Right, and
TTPs.
Find the critical path. Same. Right, same. You're just changing the nature of what you're doing. In the same way that P Company or Selection, for me to use for us an militaristic analogy, there would be times you're on a tab, right, or the log run, where you're being beasted. You've got to get up in the middle of the night, right, and it's freezing cold, you're soaking wet, and you just got to get up. And do you do it with, now some people would watch the odd people amongst us who seem to jump up and shake their hands, I can't wait. Okay, freak. Right, but for everybody else, with a freezing cold, dying to be just in a warm bed, thinking, what the bloody hell are we doing? But we got up and for whatever reason, beasted probably, and shouted at, just got on with it. But that part of your brain just switched off and you got on with it. I know it's not the same, and 10 years is a long time. I just look back and think, I don't know how people have supported me. I don't know why my wife has stuck by it, and my son and my daughter, but they have. And people very graciously keep saying, I don't feel comfortable, but they admire the fact that we've stuck at it. But
it's admirable. Admirable. Like you're saying, like again, like flipping heck. Helen's got the patience of a saint.
More than a saint. You don't see when she's not on. I'm not talking. But I read that Harvard Business Review, and I thought, I feel like that a bit. We are doing something that nobody else could see in 2014. Still, I mentioned to you earlier, the UK space industry, I don't think still subscribe to the view that I'm laying out. But I'm telling you, as sure as eggs are eggs, you can get me back in 10 years' time. What I say will pass, the need and the steps that humanity will have to take in order to go and need that power station on the moon, they'll happen. Same on our oceans, same in space.
Yeah. We are going to go to the questions. I know we've got time constraints. So, questions from the Platinum live stream patrons. Become a patron of H Hour. Platinum patron. You get to listen, watch, live stream, and ask questions. But make the guests squirm with God questions. Already asked that one.
Let me just take off.
Oh, there are some squirm questions. Yeah, right. If you had the power, if John had the power to make the UK government have a policy regarding space, what would it be?
I think we need to start setting trends, not following other people's ideas. Right? Let's be sort of slightly jingoistic about it. I think that the UK has an opportunity. I didn't vote for Brexit, right? I would have happily stayed in the... It was just easier to travel around, right? And now the French are going to introduce these border checks and all sorts, right? But it was easier, right? But the UK made the decision, and I'm saying, well, let's let the UK and the entrepreneurialism within the UK, not me, but all sorts of businesses and opportunities for the UK to be at the vanguard. You've got to punch above your weight, and if you want to get taken notice. Right, it's like a bantamweight. It's like a baby getting in the ring with Anthony Joshua and saying, "Come on, then." You've got to do something that people are going to sit up and take notice. So we don't. We constantly sort of are guilty for what we want to promote and want to push, and we shouldn't be.
We're stagnating. We're stagnant.
Yeah. And more than stagnating, Hugh, I think we're going to go backwards unless we start taking bold initiatives. The decision, very graciously, of the Crown Estates to back us, I think, is part of that. And yet I spoke in Cornwall to have a centre in the UK that helps support our initiative so that we become a global leader in floating offshore wind. That's just one initiative.
Well, to be honest, when I saw the Ohio thing come online, it made me pretty sad because I thought, man, that's not going to be Cornwall. It's not going to be the UK. It's going to be America. And I was extremely frustrated because I was frustrated at the things you just alluded to, the way the state of the UK when it comes to trying to do things like you're doing. And then when I saw that Cornwall was still on the cards, or the UK was still on the cards, oh God, okay, that's all right. All right, we're not going to be first. It won't be the first. It'll be the second for Blue Abyss. Fingers crossed. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a frustration for me. Because we could have been doing that here and motivating. I'd like to think it would be a good news story. It's in Cornwall, right? We're paying way over the opportunity to pay way over the national average salary, and especially in Cornwall, to give Cornish people, that part of the region, the south of the country, the southwest, wow, a new thing to focus on. We then become, Hugh, immaterial. It's all the other things that follow on and grow because, and all the collaboration you can foster. Then we just become a small part of the story. Fantastic. But you need the kernel of something in order for the other stuff to grow. And we just seem to be, I just can't even sum it up. It's just so frustrating.
Do you think philosophy is useful? Stephen Hawking said it was dead.
Philosophy? No, I'll tell you who I follow an awful lot of. Stoic thinking, right? Stoicism. So you heard of Sisyphus, the guy who's pushing the rock up the hill all the time. I mean, there's times I felt like him personified. I've been reincarnated. That was me. I was pushing that rock. And sometimes you think it's just going to break me. That rock is just going to roll right over the top and break you. And I've had those moments still. But a Stoic mindset, reading quotes, quotes that suggest that somebody else has been here, done it, and has suffered just as much or more. They give you a hope. So I don't think philosophy in that respect. You're learning something because somebody else has been on that journey, doing something different. But
what is the kindest thing someone's done for you in your career?
in my career, I remember Sergeant Major not going completely off his trolley at me for being late back from a carder. I mean, he had the right to go off his trolley.
What was a carder?
It was the potential officer's carder. They sent me back to Beaconsfield for 4 months. And on the way back, I was slightly late, let's be honest now. I was slightly late getting to Luton Airport. But the RAF, what do they call them?
Who is ever on time for Luton Airport? That place is an absolute nightmare to get to.
There you go, right? I'm going to put it down to the buses. But I was within the time frame, and the transport, what do they call them? You know, the transport people, it was like a check-in desk,
The
right?
MT?
Yeah, right.
Oh, what? At the
airport.
Luton?
Yeah, but it was an RAF guy.
Oh, right.
And I arrived, and I'd arrived at, with 20 minutes to go. And I said, right, I'm here. And he said, well, I've already booked on indulgence passengers. And I said, and?
Indulgence passengers?
Yeah, people could, family members, friends could turn up at Luton Airport and want to go to Gibraltar, for instance, and pay 20 quid. But you're on standby. It's like a standby passenger.
Right.
But if all the flight wasn't full, they'd pay 20 quid and go to Cyprus. Anyway, I had this stand-up row with this guy, and I said, well, you better give me a warrant then. I need to go back to my base. And I'm thinking, sheesh, I'll get back to the depot. Somebody's going to have the flipping heebie-jeebies at me. And I went storming in to HQ, Company Sergeant Major, because I thought it was somebody I knew. And it wasn't. And he looked at me, and I looked at him and think, who the bloody hell are you? And so I said, thinking forward quickly, fail quickly. I said, oh, sir, and I ranted this. And I thought, just take no prison. Just ranted at him to the degree that he just capitulates. He said, for crying out, he said, right, go and grab a mattress and then drop your stuff off. Grab a mattress, get some scran, come back here and I'll give you some tasks. I said, could you just check with my Sergeant Major in Gibraltar at the time? I said, could you just check and see if what he wants me to do? Thinking, that's what a child, who says that? He's just going to say, I'm telling you, grab a mattress, grab some lunch, get on with it. Anyway, I came back after lunch and I was about 15 feet away from this, and I could hear my Sergeant Major on the other end of the phone. And then the Sergeant Major in the office had his phone like this. What the hell? And he said, tell him and he dropped the C-bomb loud enough for, I think, most of the battalion headquarters to hear it. And so when I got back he gave me a week's leave. He said, but do not be late. And I was walking through BHQ with my bags. Who should be walking towards me? But my Sergeant Major.
Oh, no.
And as he walked past me, I braced up and he just looked at me and he went, Vickers, you C-bomb. But he just kept walking. I thought, and it was that sort of, why that particular story? Because at a young age, he said, you can be a little bit rebellious and there'll be somebody that will give you the opportunity. Gene Cernan, he didn't need to say anything. And then there have been people that have financially just, on the back of seemingly nothing, just helped. It doesn't have to be very much, but they just made a difference. And that, I've had a number of people. That was a long story for a short question, sorry.
No, that's right. What's the most difficult thing about your job?
Managing people. Managing people when you have to give them bad news, or they don't agree, or you think that you've seen something, and no matter what, they'll argue about their experience or their background or their seniority in some respect, and you think, I find that a little bit difficult. But I've become slightly immune to saying it's going to be this way. I've become immune to the feeling of I'm going to feel uncomfortable saying it's going to be this way.
Got to work out what kind of a lead you are there.
A good one. The best. I remember.
You forget I work for you.
I tell you the benefit of being a full screw. I'll tell you the benefit of being a full screw and being in charge. I've been there and done it. I remember when people, and you just think, well, you don't need to be an arsehole to me, mate. You've asked me to do something, I'll do it. And then you meet NCOs, and NCOs can make or break you, can't they? Full screws can make or break your life because they'll watch what the sergeant says, or they'll colour man, or an officer. But it's under them that you're going to live and breathe. And if they just want to be, I mean, we've served them. I've met people who are just out and out sadistic bullies, right? And you just think, I've just got to watch my back. If I go to sleep, I'm genuinely going to keep something next to me. I'm going to stab them if they touch me, because they're just that sort of person. But if you get a good NCO, They just absolutely, they'll go out their way to protect you. They make, you want to be like them. And I watched Ian be like that, and I thought, I want to be like that.
2 questions left. Is there pressure to have people from certain backgrounds in your field, e.g., women, ethnic minorities?
No. I'm always happy to give military people as much help as I can, and if there's a military person that I think we can benefit from them, absolutely. I'd rather personally, maybe I shouldn't say it publicly, but I'm going to. I'm always trying to give veterans a help up, because I think veterans don't sometimes recognise how capable they would be in a new environment. If you take Richard Tanner, for instance, a former naval guy, commander in the Royal Navy.
He's your marine lead, isn't he?
He's just done phenomenally. That transition from
maritime lead, sorry, not marine.
Yeah, that transition from being in the military to being, the role he's doing has been phenomenal. Does it work for everybody? No. There are some phenomenal women who I've cited. Emma Farrell, who I've learnt from, Dr. Sylvia Earle, Anna Lee Fisher. There are all manner of people I look at and think, wow. It's less about that you're a woman or man. Just you are a decent human being, and you're teaching me something, or you're giving me some advice, and they're not judging me, and I'm not trying to judge them. So the colour, all I'm not interested in. Quality,
merit.
Merit.
Yeah, merit, absolutely. Last question. What book would you recommend to everyone about science? If you're going to recommend one book about science, what would it be?
Jeez, that's a really good... I would have said Think and Grow Rich about anything else, but about science. Sheesh, I don't know. What would you read? I don't know. I just read so many. I mean, I've read factual stories, right? There's one riding rockets? Mike, the astronaut, a guy called Byron Hood's now going to completely castigate me if he ever watches this. But Riding Rockets was a phenomenal book. Scott Parazinski's written a book. Andy Talbot's written a book. I've read them both. But in terms of a science book, I don't tend to read that sort of... I tend to glean, like most of us, internet facts, watching a bit of a documentary here, and the key things that you just pick out and think, bloody hell, I didn't realise that. I don't know that I've read many science books that I could just quote. I'm struggling now.
No, that's right. So what was that Riding Rockets book?
The Riding Rocket, Mike, he was an astronaut. He talks about going up on a shuttle. It's a bit like Chicken Hawk in that you think it's all going to be, bravado, all American hero types. And you read the end of Chicken Hawk. Have you read Chicken Hawk?
Yeah, what a book.
And you read the last chapter and you think, bloody hell, I had no idea that was coming. Riding Rocket's a little bit like that. There's not the same sort of twist, but it was just so brutally honest. It was fascinating to read it. Scott's own journey from being a 5 times NASA astronaut to going to the top of Everest. There's personal endeavour, right? I've just sat behind the desk and designed a business. Other people have got out and done extraordinarily phenomenal things. I haven't been able to do anything like that. But science books, but that Think and Grow Rich, that changed the way I think about what I do.
Excellent. It's been a good chat, mate. It's been a good catch up.
Thank you, Hugh. I appreciate it.
Blueabyss.uk.
Blueabyss.uk still.
And there's an app now as well, I noticed.
I haven't seen the app. If there's an app, I'm going to...
It's a web-based app, but not a web-based app.
I think
it's an app you can put on your phone as a shortcut to the website.
I think there's a new website coming, so hopefully we'll get all the app stuff done.
Well, I like the current one.
It's going to improve.
Okay, that's good.
If you're going to do something different, do it better.
Yeah, okay, cool. Right, been good. Good luck for 2025, and I look forward to coming and visiting in Ohio. I hope my room is of adequate standards. Yeah, bed block.
Yeah. And the slippers. Your slippers are there.
My slippers. Yeah, don't forget my slippers. And some nice itchy, scratchy blankets.
Definitely. Only one though. Only one you can actually put on the bed.
Only one, and a starched bed sheet.
Best way.
Cheers, dude.
Thank you, mate.